When we transitioned into the Taken King, there were a lot of exotics that were just kind of bad. A bunch of them got some buffs, and some of them became usable. Some, well, didn't. Now it's Rise of Iron, and some exotics still need buffs. Today, I'd like to address some of those exotics that are probably underused among players, and just kind of riff on how I think they could be made a little more appealing. The first is Helm of Inmost Light. In Rise of Iron, it doesn't see a lot of use despite a buff to Headstrong. Both Headstrong and Death from Above are probably the least selected options in their respective columns, which would make this helm a good choice to get some free bonuses, but alas, I don't see it that often. I think that an interesting buff for the helm would be to give all Fist of Havoc related bonuses, Aftermath, Death from Above, and Shockwave, and then letting you supercharge either Shockwave or Aftermath. Shockwave would give you another wave's worth of distance, and Aftermath would leave a bigger AoE. I think this would be an interesting PvP buff for the helm that hopefully wouldn't break the game. It doesn't feel like it would. In PvE, you could argue that it wouldn't be too much help since you tend to kill stuff on the initial smash, but in PvP, it would give Fist of Havoc much more oomph to maybe start having people use it in more clutch moments instead of just on a single person, as to not waste all of its potential. None of the Fist of Havoc bonuses are really game-breaking on an individual level. Combining them doesn't really feel like it would destroy the balance of the game either, since most of the damage is done on the initial smash. Let's do a Hunter one next. Knucklehead Radar gives you Third Eye with all primary weapons. Unfortunately, this exact perk is on the artifact Memory of Gellion, so you could just use the artifact to free up your exotic slot. This exotic is outdated and needs a buff to bring it up to modern standards, and so I think a pretty quick fix would be to give it the bonuses of Keen Scout. Keen Scout gives you the ability to apply the Hunted debuff, letting you track a target for a little bit, and gives you the Enhanced Radar. I think the Relentless Tracker perk wouldn't be enough on this helm, only getting it whenever you got a kill. It just is not powerful enough. Keen Scout really works well with the concept of the helm. It's a radar. It explains itself, essentially. Warlocks, you know what really needs some love is Alchemist Raiment. The only redeeming factor about these robes right now is that they look good. So first off, either crank up the effectiveness of the whole glimmer portion on these robes or just toss it. I get that the whole thing is supposed to be turning something mundane into gold or money, but right now it just barely does anything. It should almost be a hidden Easter egg-like effect. As for the better portion of the bonus on this chest armor, I think an interesting buff, and probably the most contentious of the buffs in this video, could be that when you collect an Orb of Light, it'll actually power up the damage of your next grenade or melee instead of your super up to a cap. So Orbs of Light collected would not go towards charging your super. Getting multiple orbs would stack the damage bonus, but the smaller Orbs of Light wouldn't count as much as the bigger orbs. At maximum stacks, which would be 5 of the biggest Orbs of Light collected, you would be at maximum charge, and in PvP at least, that would let your next melee attack be a one-shot, and I can already hear the yelling through the internet, let me finish. Once you use any ability, the power is used up and you need to start over. Grenades would gain a rather large damage boost, but I'm not sure making something like Firebolt or Axion be a one-shot would be smart. Firebolt with Burning would, I think, be a one-shot. But, whenever you die, you lose all of your stacks. The reason that I think it should be a one-shot at max charge is to actually encourage its use, because if it can't one-shot, I don't think it would be used at all. I can hear the cries of being one-shot, Thunderstrike sniped, but I don't think it would really happen that often. Plus, if you use any ability while charging up, you'll lose the stacks. So you'd have to chase around 5 large Orbs of Light while not using any abilities and without dying. I don't really think that happens too often. This is something that I think would be pretty interesting to add to the exotic landscape, and if the damage did end up being too potent, you know, the numbers can always be messed with. I know, Warlocks, I know, but I think it would have a chance of working out. Let's move to a PvE buff. Immolation Fists felt like they had a strong start in the Taken King as an exotic, but have basically fallen off the face of the earth once we realized, not really that good. The problem is that Explosive Pyre is already really good. the best PvE option in that column. Fleet Fire isn't really used at all, and Flame Seeker is a good PvP option. Explosive Pyre isn't a game changer for PvP, and Flame Seeker isn't a game changer for PvE, so you never really need both in either activity. With the name Immolation in the name, why don't we light some stuff on fire? For a PvE buff, we could have targets hit by Hammers of Soul be affected by Melting Point in addition to what the fists do now. Also, you could have Melting Point affect targets struck by the explosion of Explosive Pyre to really push damage capabilities. Initial thoughts say that this might be a little too much on the strong side, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it would be that bad. We can make Melting Point half duration, half strength. It can stack like Viking Funeral, but maybe with a little more strength. In raids, it would let Titans actually apply Melting Point to bosses, since that's kind of a rarity in that environment, although I know Axis is a little more friendly towards it. Whereas I don't think it would affect the game too much in Heroics or PvP, really. In PvP, it would punish people who are hit by the explosion of Explosive Pyre a little bit more, but otherwise it's a pretty tame PvP buff. I hear the argument that Viking Funeral Warlocks would become less desirable, but the change would also make up for the lack of damage or DPS that hammers do to bosses. In the raid, hammers are basically a huge damage loss without the use of sunspots, and even then, I don't think it's really that great. Finally, a buff that I would like to see experimented with to Hunter exotics comes in the form of a Merger. Don't Touch Me is currently a pretty lackluster exotic, pretty bad in PvP, but it's a decent insurance exotic in PvE, making sure you don't die, but otherwise boring. Khepri Sting is a pretty cool exotic with a cool ability with no practical use in most parts of the game since it takes so long to set up. But if we were to merge the two, you'd give people an interesting PvE option in terms of both offense and defense. You get hit by an attack, you go invisible, recover, and then retaliate with a big backstab. Just having one or the other is boring, but combining the effects would make for a much cooler exotic experience. I don't think this merger would be enough to send this exotic into the mainstream, though. I think it would need something else to push this exotic into, hey, I might actually use this territory, but it might make for some interesting situations. Anyway, those are some interesting buffs that I wouldn't mind seeing come to some exotics in the game. There's still quite a few underperforming exotics in the game, but these are just some that I could think of interesting ideas for. If you enjoyed this video, a positive rating would be appreciated. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.